Apple testing a tablet with a smaller screen. What's the idea behind this?
Well, Apple has seen some success that Amazon's had with the smaller Kindle. Samsung's had some success with a small tablet. But we should take a step back and just remember this is just based on communications we've had with suppliers. But the journal and our colleagues in Asia reported that Apple is testing these smaller size tablet screens. That doesn't mean they're going to come. That just means that they're taking a look at it and seeing how they would appear and how they would function. And they're talking like 8-inch screen. Right now, it's about 9.7 inches is a typical iPad screen.
And we shouldn't be deceived by the fact that it just seems a small amount of inches, because when you take down the inches on the diagonal, that actually takes a lot of screen area away from you, doesn't it?
Yeah, you would notice it. You definitely would notice it, and it would be a more compact version. And we've seen Apple do this before with the iPods, where they had a much bigger version and eventually got them smaller.
Well, Spencer, what do you make of this? Do you think they're going to be selling this to people with very narrow fingers?
I have no idea. But I think George makes a good point that they have, not even experimented. They have actually created smaller versions of existing products. So I think that actually does lead me to believe that there's actually a real chance that this might happen. I think the bigger question, though, is what's the consumer demand for it? Because if the numbers show that the people really want the bigger tablets, then I think Apple will be less likely to roll out a smaller tablet. On the other hand, Apple, usually whatever they make, people really like. So I think the jury's still out on the smaller versus bigger tablets, and that's why they're testing it.
Right, and it would be interesting to see what the pricing would be on something like that. I mean, they have set the price point for that standard size tablet, but would this be something that would be half the price, 2/3 of the price of a standard iPad? And it would be interesting to see if they did offer it, at what price they would offer it.
And what would the name be? That would be a good question, iPad mini or whatever. One of the questions you've got to have with any device is, what is its primary use? And right now, I think the primary use of a lot of iPads is emailing and also media consumption, watching movies. And so if it's smaller, it's not as good.
And that was the argument that Steve Jobs made. He said a tablet needed to be this big so that people can watch movies and consume media in that way. However, there are the convenience of carrying it around that a smaller tablet also brings.
I think the lesson of the Kindle Fire, which I think this prototype is being created in response to in some respects, is that people don't necessarily, they're not clamoring for a 7-inch tablet. They are clamoring for a cheaper tablet than the $500 base price of the iPad. So I think that it makes sense that if the sub $300 category really takes off and starts eating into the iPad, so far it really hasn't, because the Q4 numbers for the iPad were like off the charts, even though people were afraid that Amazon, the Kindle Fire, was going to eat into it substantially. It didn't. So if that really starts taking off, then I think the justification for the smaller tablet will become more real, because it's a lower price, basically.
And very quickly on this, I mean, that's fine with all 3G devices. What with a 4G device? Will any 4G device, even at $700-800, will that trump anything that's cheap?
It depends on the market, but I'm not sure if people really appreciate the quickness that a 4G device offers versus a 3G device. I'm not sure that
I've never seen one, so
it's not like when HD TV came out and you saw an HD TV and you compared it to your traditional bubble back, you immediately recognized the difference. I'm not sure people appreciate that, just because the 4G service is inconsistent throughout the country. So one thing I would note about Apple, there's a lot of news about Apple, but we should get more news on Apple later today. Tim Cook is going to be presenting at a Goldman conference at 3:30. Goldman Sachs Tech Conference in San Francisco. So,
and we will get an audio feed of that, and we will have news of that on the 4 p.m. news hub that I'll be hosting later this afternoon.
Do we know what he's going to be talking about? Is he just going to give a general investor update, or might there be some new information that comes out?
There will be a general investor update. There also may be some questions taken, so you don't quite know what's that going to ask. One thing, of course, people are waiting to hear and see from Apple is a dividend. So, not saying that this is the event where Apple would announce it.
Where's my money?
But that could come next week. The shareholder meeting for Apple is February 23rd.
If I was at that meeting, I would ask him about the report the other report, Apple report, which we published in the paper today, which was that Apple that Verizon and AT&T are going to be getting the 4G version of the iPad that runs on their LTE networks. And when I remember, I was at the launch of the iPhone on Verizon a year or two ago, and Tim Cook actually was the executive who led that presentation, and everyone thought it might be a 4G, but it wasn't. And the reason they said it wasn't was because the batteries weren't up to par yet. The 4G network sucked too much life out of the batteries, and there was
I'm
also
glad you finished that sentence.
And they were also bigger. And so I think he's going to be getting questions about that today, because with the iPad, it's a bigger form factor, the batteries are bigger, and you could sort of have a better trade-off there.
And we've seen that 4G does hit the batteries, as was reported last week in the journal, that the constant search by the device to look for a 4G signal weighs on the battery life.